matter is that's what a drone is. It's a tool to capture that, whether it's photo imagery, whether it's whatever type of data it may be picking up. That's what it really does. It's a platform for that data. So rather than my introducing everybody and reading from the script, what I'd like to do is start off by just asking each member of the panel here to give you a very brief biography, and then to give you just kind of a brief summary of what they see the end use, of their perspective of the end use of drones. And I think I'll probably start out with David. David is a member of the Los Angeles Police Department. So David, if you want to hold forth and let people know what you do, and of course you're going to welcome them to Las Vegas.
Yes, I'm David Martell. I'm a police officer with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I've been there for 20 and a half years now. I did 4 years in the military as a police officer also. It's taken me 4 years to finally get our program started. We fly currently the H520 along with the Typhoon H from Unique. We have 5. We don't have just a specific unit. We have one in traffic, we have one in our armor, which flies for SWAT, and then we have one in CSI for crime scene documentation, and then I have one for training in search and rescue. I'm assigned to the air support unit. Our first flight ever was October 1st, so that was a very learning experience for me when it came to crime scene documentation. So it took us 3 hours to map out the whole scene with 3 H520s, and then it took me 3 weeks out there just to get aerials of the other evidence that FBI and our agency wanted. So this is the future. Technology is growing, changes all the time, and we're finally getting to the point where we are understanding the use of this great tool when it comes to law enforcement. So.
Good, thank you, David. Michael, you want to self-introduce yourself?
Sure. Name's Mike Uleski. I'm out of the Daytona Beach area. I'm actually a sergeant for the city of Daytona Beach Shores. Now, we're a Department of Public Safety, so I'm a little different. I'm actually cross-certified as a law enforcement officer, firefighter, EMT. So I get to do all 3. My background is actually manned aviation. I've been flying since I was 17, then I ended up at Embry-Riddle, graduated there with a degree in aeronautical sciences. And about 9 years later, I ended up in public safety. We started our program, our first operational mission was October 2016 for Hurricane Matthew. Since then, I've flown both Hurricane Matthew and Hurricane Irma. So we were doing after-action, pre-action, FEMA documentation, all kinds of different mapping missions for them. A little bit of search and rescue, infrastructure inspection, but we fly for anything. If I can put the thing in the air, I'm going to put it in the air. We fly mostly S.W.A.R.M as my primary. We also fly Mavic Pros. We'll do Overwatch for search warrants, indoor tactical operations. I got to put a phone charger on a guy's front porch because he was pointing a rifle at us. That was kind of fun. Yeah. So it's thinking outside the box. So we've been up and around fairly successful. So it's nice to be up here with everyone else that's kind of using us as an end user.
Great. Keaton?
Yeah, so my name is Ken Newton. I'm with the Linwood Fire Department, which is a suburb in the Chicagoland area. I've been involved in UAS for a little over 5 years now. I have 22 years in information technology, including 8 years with Microsoft, and 16 years in the fire service. I'm a firefighter EMT. I'm the EMS coordinator as well as the UAS coordinator for my agency. I'm also involved at the state level with Mavis, Illinois, in helping them define their guidelines and policies with the UAS working group, and managing and driving that group as the program lead. I think I might have you beat, Michael, because I actually swung a cell phone into a barricaded subject's window.
He's got me on that one.
So,
then we were discussing, I believe, in that thread of projectile launchers after that. It got kind of a little involved.
It got a little fun, but it was, I've done a lot of exciting things, a lot of things I would never thought I would have done 3-4 years ago. So, as David mentioned, this technology is new, it's here to stay, and it's going to help us in public safety, do our jobs more efficiently and safely for everyone.
Great, and Jim, I've known Jim for quite a few years. Jim, I have to tell you, was a very, very early adopter. He lives about 30 miles up the hill from me, and I live in Sacramento, and Jim is in Colfax. But Jim started a group called S.W.A.R.M, which was focused on search and rescue, and he's been doing this for a very, very long time. So, Jim, if you want to elucidate that for everybody.
Thanks, Bruce. Again, I'm Jim Bowers. I am the founder and managing director of S.W.A.R.M. S.W.A.R.M stands for Search with an Aerial RC Multirotor. In early 2013, I was just an artist. I've been an artist all my life, and using drones that we were actually building just from basic flight controllers back then, because there were no off-the-shelf drones to buy. And while I was doing that, a friend of mine, her fiance went missing for a long distance, like for 60 miles, this search area, and someone came up with the idea that we could search for him with the drone. So she asked me if I would get involved, and of course I couldn't, say no, even if I really didn't know what I was doing. So for 4.5 days, I searched for Eric Garcia, and it was across county lines. So the Placer County Sheriff and the El Dorado County Sheriff were kind of trying to figure out who was the lead on this search, and they eventually called off the search, and we then narrowed it down with my drone to it had to be within this 2-mile area. So we did talk the Placer County Sheriff's Department into sending motorcycles into that area off-road, and we did find Eric Garcia deceased in his car. And that moment just moved me so much emotionally that I had to do something, so I started the S.W.A.R.M Network, and it's an all-volunteer organization. We have over 8,000 members now around the world. Our pilots now have to be 107 certified, and we are usually involved in a search mission somewhere around the world. So we're very, very committed to public safety and the advancement of this technology. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So you can see what we have on the panel is a pretty good perspective of what is and ways in which drones can be utilized, and as the technology begins to develop, of course, our ability to expand on that technology grows along with it. So I'd like to put it out to the panel, and again, I'll just start. I'll go back to Michael and sort of throw it out to the panel in general. What your overall perspective is on the use of drones, and how you see it beginning to develop and be implemented.
Well, the thing is, we're pretty much the pioneers in this, and I did a recent presentation, so I had to do a little research, and just in law enforcement alone, there's about 18,000 roughly law enforcement agencies across the country, and that's ranging all the way from a municipality that has a single constable all the way up to a 3-letter identifier out of the national government. And of that, I know a recent that we saw survey was that like 900 have some form of a drone program. And I would probably roughly say that about 2/3 of those probably have a drone program that's not fully operational. So we're still looking at maybe 2 to 3% of the entire, and that's just law enforcement. When you add in fire, now you're over probably 40,000-50,000 different public safety agencies across the country. We're small, we're very, very small, and it's because, number one, public safety in general, we're slow to adopt technology as a whole. And I kind of mentioned this, I did a presentation earlier, and I said, this is the way we do it, this is the way we'll always do it, and that is a very bad attitude. The problem is it's invasive of our industry, so sometimes to get people that are into that thought process of, don't bother with the drone, it's too much trouble, we get passed on by. So it's kind of up to us to almost self-promote ourselves and push it and show what we can do. And I hate to be that kid in the back of the room with my hands up screaming and yelling, call on me, but that's kind of what we have to do at this point in time, because we're thought over. We're not part of the system just yet. We're a novelty rather than a normal tool.
Yeah, I'll just comment on that, because what you just said is absolutely true, and the truth of the matter is, in a larger sense, everybody in this room really is part of the solution in trying to get these things in the air and get them utilized, and it's a long, hard uphill, which is much longer than I had ever anticipated that it would be, for a whole range of reasons. So anybody else here on the panel want to comment on that?
Yeah, I will say, you know, I discovered drones for public safety use about 2.5, 3 years ago. And I first brought it to my chief, and my chief was like, oh, that's really cool. And then about 2 months into it, it's like, no, we're not going to do anything with the drone of whatsoever, shape, fashion, form. It's just not going to happen. Well, there was an incident that did occur that it proved to actually provide a lot of value. He came 180 degrees, and it's going to be up to not just us up here on the panel, but everybody here in this room to help educate those naysayers out there. Because, as Michael said, it's very true. There's just kind of this methodology of tradition. This is the way we've always did it. This is the way my father did it. This is the way my grandfather did it. His great-grandfather, and on and on and on. And trying to break that mentality and trying to embrace technology is very, very difficult in public safety. I'd say it's very hard in the fire service. I think in law enforcement's a little easier, but I could be wrong. But it's, you know, typically a fireman says all they need is an axe and a hose. And we still have guys that are out there like that. So, you know, they don't even use thermal imaging cameras when they go into a structure fire. That's considered like the normal standard tools, but there's some guys like, I'll just do it the old-fashioned way by feeling with my hand, or by not wearing what we call a Nomax hood to protect our ears. Because they would say, if it starts to feel like my ear is melting, then it's too hot in there. Like, no, you should not be feeling your ears melting. You should be embracing the technology to help protect you. So this is a mentality that is out there, and it's just something that we have to deal with.
The one big thing that we're having an issue with now is budget. I pretty much work with a zero budget right now. Technology is there. They know it's there. They're just not willing to get the money to be able to pay for it. The other thing is we have an agency here that now it's a city entity that is controlled by the city, that the fire department wants their hand into it, the police department wants their hand into it, the emergency management wants their hand into it. Instead of everybody coming together and working as one, everybody wants their own bit of it. That's a big problem that we have here when it comes to public safety. Fire is fire, police is police, EMS is EMS. If you can, in your neck of the woods, try to get everybody to work together. I know it's very difficult, but it will actually help you, and you'll benefit from it more than just working on your own when it comes to this.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, what we found in search and rescue is, like David was saying, that the public perception on drones is, you know, when it comes to introducing UAS into law enforcement, fire, and search and rescue, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because the public and law enforcement and government, they're grappling with public safety. You know, you've got this unmanned aerial vehicle in the air, who knows what it could do, and liability. So that was the major obstacle when I would do talks and introductions and explanations and all that sort of thing for sheriff and fire departments and even the FBI, was they were really on board until they hit that public perception, invasion of privacy, and liability. So those are three of the obstacles that still have to be overcome. I was talking to Michael down at the end. I kind of had the idea that we're like out of the Wild West now, and drones were, I don't know, maybe like 40% of the way there with law enforcement and fire and all that. And as he explained, we're not even 2% there yet. So, you know, we've got a long way to go. And so S.W.A.R.M, we're very careful about taking baby steps. We are as much involved, to me anyway, our pilots use 60–70% of their abilities and their direction on any particular mission as family support, because these families are desperate, they're grieving, they're panicking, so it's as much important for them to just be there as support and that sort of thing as it is to actually go out there and fly the mission. It all kind of goes hand in hand. So public perception is a biggie. When we get out there and fly a mission, I've been shot at twice now, my drone. I had a Phantom 1 with a GoPro on it that got shot down by a fully automatic machine gun. So I've got it hanging on my wall in my studio. Maybe it's a picture of it. But like I said, public perception is going to take all of you, including these gentlemen and myself.
Yeah, well, I'll comment on that as well. I'm in full agreement with that statement. I look at I believe that drones have a real, still at this point, still have it could have a better image than they do, but I also believe that it is going to be in public safety where drones will really come into their own, where people can quickly see that the use of a drone is going to facilitate a rescue, going to facilitate the safety of a civilian, the safety of a public service officer. Once people begin to see that, I think that perception is going to change, but it's a lot slower than I thought it would be. But I really do believe that perspective is going to change within the use of drones within the public service entities. Okay, so you know what I'd like to actually do is any of you want to comment on something where you have used a drone in a really successful and very positive way, and just want to relate that.
Sure.
So kind of leading to the whole public perception perspective, what we do is we actually allow people, assuming it's not like a law enforcement mission or what it may be, we set up a 32-inch TV and we stream and people can watch what it is that we're doing. So a lot of times we've done crowd monitoring for like emergency management, and we set up a big 32-inch TV and say, here, this is a thermal image we can see, and this is why we're flying. And having that level of transparency with the public has been hugely a positive thing, especially in communities that are, typically conservative. They were very much more coming down. Usually the conversation starts off negative, and then you kind of start explaining things and so on and so on. And eventually, most people come around. Some, still have their views, and you're never going to change. But the idea is trying to be as transparent as possible with your programs will ultimately make you more successful.
Yeah, I'll kind of piggyback on that from the public perception thing, because we started our program, I would say 2015 was pretty much the year where if you were seen flying a drone as a law enforcement officer, you were peeking in someone's windows or you were doing something nefarious. That's just the way that it was. And then we had Hurricane Matthew that showed up, and I was part of the initial planning because they brought in all the supervisors. We were laying out incident command and everything. And the chief was like, hey, could you bring in your drone? I had an old Phantom 3 Advanced that I still fly for training. Thing still exists. And he's like, can we use it for damage assessment, clearing roadways, infrastructure after the storm? So, thanks, I've been waiting for this day for years. Like, finally, we get to do something with it. And he wasn't as concerned about public perception during this because obviously we're in an emergency type situation. But this is when flying drones for hurricane type stuff was pretty new on the horizon. And in our jurisdiction, 98% of our populace evacuated, but we still do get some that stay. So we do some people are going to be there, but we're also beachside. So once the winds get over 55 miles per hour, we actually hard block the bridges. So once you get across the bridge and evacuate, until that storm's over and we start letting people back, you're not coming back over. That's just the way that it is. Primarily because we're worried about looters and other emergency people, sightseers getting themselves and becoming victims. So afterwards, the storm passed through. I was doing my damage assessment mapping missions and stuff, and my lieutenant's always looking at the production value of what I create. And he's like, hey, can we put something together and put it on Facebook? Because our Facebook page is just lighting up. Can you check this address? Can you check that address? What happened to this house? What happened here? So we just went and put together some of my damage assessment photos and video. We put it up on, and all of a sudden everyone's like, what a great use of the technology. This is wonderful. I could have bought anything I wanted after that. It was that use case, but that was that one incident. I think that's what most of us find, similar like they had on October 1st. We need that one incident that we can finally go and show what we can truly go and do. And then all of a sudden you see the light bulb go on and now you're popular. So you have to, as much as we hate to have those incidents happen because it's mass shootings and natural disasters and stuff like that, it's almost what we need to actually go and prove that we can go out there and do those kind of things.
I want to just interject on that real quick. That can actually work both ways. While we're waiting for someone, I don't know, important to get, well, you saw the news coverage, where was it, down in South America, the newly elected official was giving a speech to 10,000 troops when like a typhoon.
Venezuela.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. And they exploded that drone, whether it was intentional or pre-detonated or whatever. That right there shows you what the lethal potential is right now for the downside. So, we're right there on that cusp. We're waiting for something really incredible to happen to get public perception and mass media on board. Because if mass media is all about, privacy and spying, and my neighbor came over and said, you flew by my property while my wife was over there sunbathing and all that. So I showed him my drone footage, and she was a dot because I was 300 feet in the air. And I'm very sensitive to that if I'm flying anywhere near a community. And I do live in a rural area, so I don't fly over neighborhoods or anything. But while we're waiting for that good thing to happen in UAS, it can also go the other way. If something really devastating happens, if a drone gets sucked into a 747 rolling up off the runway, that is going to be devastating. Regulation is going to come right now if they don't ban consumer level drones altogether in certain geographic areas. So, and I do want to mention too, have you noticed that they talk about drones near airports and this pilot spotted that drone and all that sort of thing? But to this day, there's been absolutely no proven, as far as I know, proven evidence that a consumer drone has struck an in-flight airline, passenger, manned aircraft, or taken one down. They're sort of waiting for it. They're trying to find a way to actually publish that. But, until you see that video, remember, it's just sort of a, I don't know, pilots union or rumor, whatever. So anyway, I wanted to throw that out there.
Well, I got some bad news.
Okay.
It's happened.
Throw it at me.
There was, I know the U.S., there's supposedly one in Canada, but there has been one in the U.S. so far that it was involved in military Black Hawk. I believe it was Long Island, was it? Hudson River area. And it looks like a guy was flying beyond visual line of sight of hobbyists and struck the Black Hawk. And they actually damaged the aircraft, and they had to replace the rotor on it. They found parts of the phantom in the transmission deck, which is basically right at the top of the rotor of the helicopter. So we do know at least one in the U.S. so far. Thankfully, no one got hurt. It was a military-grade aircraft, but that was a civilian-grade aircraft. Let's say like the medevac, it could have been very much a different story.
Now, so that one in itself was, verifiable. They found parts of this phantom, right? Were they able to track down the pilot?
Oh yeah. They tracked down the pilot. I don't know what happened to him, but they tracked down the pilot.
Yeah, I think Michael was telling me that you were saying that the FAA, like a Perker with Black Sheep, they went after him, but the fines are getting reduced and all that sort of thing. So there really isn't the prosecution going on, and any jail time or big fines for those idiots out there that just do not care.
Well, this is what, has anyone seen the Vegas drone video? Anyone that saw that little incident with the airliner? And stuff like that. Us as an industry, sadly, we're kind of limited to what the FAA is actually going to go and do enforcement because we can't control that. But that's the kind of stuff that we need to self-police, because that is exactly what Jim's saying. That's what gets an industry shut down. because it only takes one bad apple to go and show what can be done. Because exactly what he was mentioned with Venezuela. Yeah, I mean, coming from the law enforcement side, we are always looking at security and how I can go, and I can do some really, really bad things if I had to, and it's a lot easier than not using a gun or an explosive or something. If you know basic chemistry, you can be a very dangerous person. Thankfully, we don't see people that have those kind of thoughts, but the potential's there. But we need to self-police as an industry, and especially those of us in public safety, is if an industry that's supposed to be representing itself as professional is not, it's not to degrade them, but they need to be brought into the fold and told how to do this properly.
Great, thank you. Dave, I'd like to ask you, certainly Las Vegas has had some pretty high-profile incidences here recently, and I think that because of the type of city that it is, you all probably face some pretty unusual circumstances because of the large crowds of people that you have, et cetera, et cetera. What is it that you see the department being able to do, and were drones deployed at all in the Mirage event, or what was going on with that?
In reference to the October 1, there's a little bit I can talk about it. Drones were not deployed at that time because I had just got back from vacation and we just got them. So the first thing I did is I started charging them up to get them ready. By the time everything was charged and everything was all done. So, but we have so many outdoor major events coming to the city. Off the record thing, don't be surprised if you're gonna see drones up in the air from the department on pretty much every major outdoor event that we have. We're gonna start really using our technology.
With events like that, can you pretty much expect that there's going to be hobbyists and consumers also up there?
We try to curb that, but you will. New Year's Eve. I don't know if you guys were in here earlier for Frank's presentation. There was a picture of New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve was great for us because our sheriff went out on TV and actually said and told everybody, we will have drones up on the strip. We will be watching you from the air. Yes, we do have aircraft, helicopters. They were flying up, but we had a lower air altitude than them, and then we coordinated with our area where we're going to be. That was the biggest help that we had, and everybody out there loved it. So every time we went up in the air, everybody stopped what they were doing, stopped walking, came up to the pedestrian gates, and started asking us questions and look at the screen and everything on it.
The live shot?
The live shot.
Dave,
Now,
let me just pursue that half a step further. What, for your purposes, for law enforcement, would you say is sort of the optimal height? And I know you were talking about how there was a separation between the helicopter and the aircraft. What would be sort of the optimal height that you would normally fly at for most of your work?
for most of the major events that we use for crowd control and all, I go around 100, 150 feet at the most.
And Keenan, what about fire?
I would say it's about the same. You know, for me, it's where I live. I don't think it's quite prevalent here. So we have a lot of trees. Usually they max about 60, 70 feet. So we like to make sure we don't accidentally, bump into one. We try to keep the drone just slightly above it, which is about 100 feet. I would say I've never had a mission that has gone over 200 feet yet.
Okay. The reason I bring that up is that I've heard some folks talking about it. There's so much discussion as to how you regulate drones and how we can best utilize them. And some of the thoughts I've heard here recently was maybe law enforcement, public safety officials should be given, and this was the suggestion, a national exemption to fly, pick the number, 100 or 150 feet, so that you're not having to fight all kinds of regulations. And that would have to come from the FAA, giving you folks the ability to do that.
There's some
What's your response
incidents,
to that?
most of our incidents where we're flying, everybody knows about the pursuit that we had with the officer involved shooting, or officer shooting through the windshield. It was national news and all that kind of stuff. That was actually a really big scene. I had to fly, they wanted me to fly the whole pursuit route. So I flew the whole pursuit route, and then at the end, where everything happened, that was actually a really big scene. So I actually had to go up to about 200 feet, 250 feet just to get an overall photo of that scene. As a law enforcement perspective, Wall, there's really no reason why we should be up above that. We should not be at about 400 feet when we're doing pictures or any crowd control stuff. Now, I can't say that that would be every time. Maybe there's sometimes that we might have to go up to 400, but for pictures and all that kind of stuff, the resolution and everything that we need to get for our evidentiary value, 200 feet, 250 feet is awesome.
Are you able to stay in full pursuit of a, 60, 80 mile an hour suspect?
No, I didn't use the drone, this was after. For
Oh.
evidentiary value, they wanted me to, because they were shooting at us the whole pursuit. So we had shell casings all along the road, so they just wanted us to fly the route, just get a perspective.
Oh, interesting.
Okay,
Yeah.
cover a little bit of the altitude.
Go right ahead.
It's very specific to mission aircraft. I flew a barricaded armed subject, and we were in the process of doing verbal negotiations with the guy. And I had the Inspire, so we had the Inspire in air. Took up Overwatch at about 150 feet, and then the negotiator calls back and says, "Hey, can he increase his altitude because it's too loud?" I mean, Inspire's a flying meat either, so it was too loud. Now we could have chosen to go with the Mavic. The Mavic's a quieter platform, so that's where we're. I flew a water rescue where we had a kayaker that was swept offshore. My chosen altitude was 380 feet because that gave me the widest area. I'm looking for a bright yellow kayak on a flat ocean, so I'm looking at how much field of view do I get at a given altitude, so I have to calculate what resolution do I need versus, because if I'm looking for a bright yellow kayak on the ocean, my resolution really isn't going to make that big of a difference. I'm looking for a giant yellow banana, I can find that. But I want to cover 800 feet in a swath because this guy's getting blown out or being carried by the current. So, and then some of my missions are done at 10 feet in the treetops. So we follow within what regulations. We've had instances where we have condos in my jurisdiction and we're in uncontrolled airspace, and we'll pop it up to 700 feet, 725 feet to get a really broad overview for traffic management. And it's hard to say that there is like a given what works kind of thing. It's so mission
specific.
aircraft specific.
Yeah, in search and rescue, all of the gentlemen here were talking about like 150 feet being optimal, and it kind of is. When we're involved in a search and rescue mission, like he was saying that the average tree, let's say 50 feet, a really tall tree, maybe 80 feet. You might find a 100-foot tall tree if you're up in Northern California, but when we go on a search mission, I get newer pilots that think they want to fly at 150, 200 feet. A victim, let's call him, is that tiny at 150 feet unless you've got a really good optical 4K zoom, whatever. And usually your iPad or whatever you're using for your visual display is not going to be 4K anyway. So if they're wearing tan clothing, they may blend in. So literally, we need to stay as kind of close to the surface or close to the ground as possible. And if we could fly at 75 feet on a search and rescue mission and fly a waypoint type of a grid pattern, and then stitch the images together, have all 8,000 of our members sort of go back over the footage on YouTube, there's a possibility we might spot that victim out there somewhere on that gigantic image or evidence of maybe where that person headed.
If with permission of the panel, I'd like to open it up to the floor. I know that there's probably a lot of questions out there that with the expertise that these folks bring to the fore, that they could answer for you, and it certainly is going to increase the conversation. Yes, sir, can I help you?
This is Mr. Bowers. I'm curious, you seem to run a lot of search missions at some point using UAVs. What do you think the standard search qualification for UAV pilots should be? What certifications nationally should they have?
Are you speaking general public, consumer hobbyists and all that, or are you talking about search and rescue?
I'm talking about search and rescue.
Yeah,
If you're flying a search, that's my question.
Yeah, in the very, very beginning of the swarm network and, that whole emotional need to do something, SWARM has never required a 107 or even a drone to be a member of the SWARM organization, because we want anybody who wants to be involved that's over 18 and responsible and doesn't have a family to be a part of this organization. Now, in order to participate in any search and rescue that represents the SWARM network, they have to have a minimum of gear equipment, number one, and their 107 active, number two, or the international equivalent of that.
So what do you think their S.W.A.R.M qualification should be?
Well, at least that, and as far as S.W.A.R in law enforcement and fire and, government agencies and all that, they go one step beyond that. Not only do they have maybe more adequate training, because SWARM, we train one-on-one as often as we can if we have professionals in that geographic area or more professionals, but a lot of our training is just right online on YouTube and so on and so forth, or a FaceTime, or, Now, all of our pilots are vetted. No pilot within the SWARM organization ever goes out on a mission unless one of our administrators, managers, etc., has had personal contact with that person. They're a member, but we're not going to send them out unless we're absolutely sure that they are qualified, etc. And just going back to that real quick, in law enforcement and fire and all that, they've got one sort of level above us in the insurance and liability coverage and all that sort of thing. Where SWARM, each of our pilots is essentially operating independently, representing SWARM, but they're required to carry their own insurance, but not necessarily mandated. Now, any of our pilots that we cannot send on a flight mission, they're still members of SWARM, but they're on a roster that we use as ground support, family support, and like hurricane, that sort of thing. Does that answer your question, sir?
Not exactly. I guess I would open it up to the group.
Sure.
Can I just, I sit on the NFPA technical committee for drone policy. This is another thing that the public safety needs to kind of get on board with, is training. In the NFPA 2400, it's coming out, I think it's supposed to be in November.
Yeah, hopefully, else here in Denver, early 2018.
Somewhere here soon. We actually put a stipulation in there that we will follow the NIST testing requirements. So they're getting ahead of the game when it comes to public safety. In law enforcement, we really don't have a set policy. The chief of police has theirs, other agencies and other committees have their own, but we don't have a set one when it comes to testing. Myself, we're implementing the NIST testing for our pilots, and that's going to happen here real soon. That's going to be kind of a requirement for us, and it should be a requirement through all public safety. And then when it comes to search and rescue stuff, our pilots have to go through a certain process to be certified to do that also.
What's the NIST?
It's the National Institute of Standards Testing.
It's a bunch of 5-gallon buckets
Yeah.
and 2x4s.
It's kind of like good housekeeping.
So I will say this, I'm from the Midwest, and we don't really do a whole lot of search and rescue because, well, we don't have a lot of foresty areas. We have some forest preserves, but search and rescue is usually kind of like, you can go find someone in a cornfield, and it's a pretty quick process.
Which was successful with the drone.
Which was successful with the drone. But, kind of getting to your point, and to David's point, there needs to be standards and training involved, and a lot of education that's out there is really about building a UAS program. How to, basically take off with your aircraft, fly and hover, and handle emergency procedures. Very few people or organizations are really tackling the tactics at the scene. How do you fly a structure fire? What value are you giving to incident command? What value are you doing for hazmat, search and rescue? How do you fly most efficiently? I'm about to do a shameless self-plug, but I have a session tomorrow at 2:15 that actually where our agency's taking a stab at saying these tactics are actually working for us, and that's what I'm going to be sharing with everybody that'll be attending what those tactics are, because I think it's the next step in the evolution of how public safety, the whole evolution of public safety usage drones is going to be. But tactics is actually a big thing, and then once you kind of define those tactics, then you need to train to those tactics. NIST does a good job of the test center, evaluating skills, but it's very agnostic to the type of incident. How I'm going to fly a disaster recon for a hurricane versus how I'm going to fly reconnaissance for a barricaded subject or a hazmat are going to be very different. A simple thing is, if I'm flying a hazmat incident and I don't set up a second landing zone in the warm zone, I can contaminate the cold zone because I should not be operating from the warm zone. No one's really kind of thought about these sorts of things. So it's the next step in public safety evolution, and it's just a normal process. Aviation went through the same thing. Back in the day, in the early days, there were a lot of plane crashes, a lot of people got hurt, and eventually got safer and safer, better and better. Law enforcement did the same thing. Fire service, at one time, even went in without air packs on. Who would have even thought of even doing so? So I think it's just a natural progression. It's one of those things that, to your point, is one of those things that need to get further developed along.
Just for 1 second here, we have to take a commercial break just to thank Unique for sponsoring this panel. I wanted to do that earlier and forgot to do that. But Unique is also something that really contributes to this. I know that Unique has furnished drones to a variety of agencies and trying to move this all forward. So for those folks with Unique, again, thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. Sir, you have been holding your hand up.
Yeah. So when you guys are shopping around for kind of some hardware or software, there's a lot of different offerings in terms of weight, size, cost, endurance. What are you guys sensitive to? What do you find important, and what's the total expense?
For one, it's research. Talk to other agencies that are similar to yours, similar mission profiles, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. But a lot of it's out of the box kind of thing. For me, we end up doing some testing with tactical operations indoor. So we're looking at active shooter type situations in a mall, supermarket, something along those lines. And a lot of people, they'll jump on something like a Mavic or a S.W.A.R.M, and we were discussing earlier, the problem is the vision positioning system works beautifully as long as you have ambient light. Once your ambient light goes out the window, now your vision positioning's down. For me, I'm a racer. I've been doing drone racing now probably on 5 years or so, and I'm fully comfortable taking in one that's in manual mode and zipping down the islands. But how do I train somebody that doesn't have that experience to do that? I can't. So we've been recently trying out the Tello, and we've been working with it and working on tactics, because the Tello works off of a straight Wi-Fi signal back to your mobile device. Well, you can also get a Wi-Fi repeater, and then that way the Tello will then go and talk to the Wi-Fi repeater. The repeater works as an amplifier and amplifies the signal back. So when my TAC team goes in, I'll shove my repeater on one of my TAC teams, and now I have a mobile repeater. And wherever they go, I can operate in the building within proximity. We're the pioneers here. So it's kind of, you have to see what and honestly, sometimes we'll buy stuff. Sadly, I've gone to some agencies and they're like, yeah, we got a brand new S.W.A.R.M 2, great. You want thermal capability? Yeah, that's next up. Oh, good luck with that. You should have talked to somebody before you bought it, because there's no plug and play thermal for an S.W.A.R.M 2. They didn't realize it. They just saw this neat looking drone and they're like, yeah, let's buy that. Research. Get on the boards. I know Key and I are both really active on the public safety Facebook page. All of us that are on there are vetted, so we're public safety professionals of some sort. Ask and find out what works, because there's no real straight answer. Don't buy this and go buy that kind of thing, because what works for me, I even found it's kind of weird. It seems like the West Coast is very unique based. It seems like they've kind of got the whole West Side with LA and Las Vegas. The East Coast, you rarely ever see anyone flying Unique, and it's because if I'm going to shopping, I'm going to talk to all the other agencies around me, and if they have something that's DJI and it works for them, well, I'm probably going to buy a DJI product. Not to say that Unique's got advantages that it does. So you really have to look at what works for you. Write up your wants, write up your needs, and then find what happens to work. And what you can afford.
So this is an interesting conversation, because and for the state of Illinois, this is actually something that we're trying to address. My first suggestion is to determine what type of incidents you plan to fly with your UAS program. Once you've kind of defined that, it should help you kind of, you want something that's going to be relatively easy to utilize. So, you know, Unique, DJI, one of the major players that makes it simple to fly. But one of the biggest things that you need to really think about is mutual aid. If you come up to a mutual aid scene, one guy has a Phantom 4, one guy has a custom-built aircraft, one's an S.W.A.R.M, then you have a Matrice 210, and then a Unique. You can't interoperate. And that can be a real issue when you're looking at when you go on the first, second, third, fourth alarm, and this has become a 12-hour, 16-hour, sometimes a 24-hour activity, or if it becomes a type 3 incident, where it's going to be multiple days. You could have, if you all were standardized on what you were using between different agencies, been able to use each other's batteries, each other's mobile devices or tablets or whatnot, but you're all on different platforms. So it's a question of not only what works for your own agency and what you're doing, but to making sure that other agencies are kind of on the same board. I mean, there's no doubt DJI is probably the most expensive out there outside of third party. Unique is probably a little more inexpensive, but it's you got to take a look at what's going on out there and make sure that everybody's on the same page, because if you show up with different pieces of equipment, it's like having different hose fittings. You get to a fireground, if some guy has a 2 1/4 inch hose fitting, it's just not going to work.
Whatever you buy, though, the one thing that's universal is product support. I've seen a lot of agencies that they got drawn in by some company that's making some custom-made machine, and it's got this part and this part and this part, and then 6 months down the road, they're starting to have problems with this, or this broke, and they call up the company, and the company's like, yeah, we don't exist anymore. And now finance is like, you just spent $4,000 on a machine that you can't fly. That'll put a nail in a coffin of a program faster than anything. So you have to look down the road, and it's not that we push the big names, but it's because I know that a year from now, I can go and get parts to fix my aircraft. I can find a maintenance provider that can repair it, because otherwise you can get yourself hemmed in.
The one good thing that's helped us is NHB. In the state of Nevada right now, it's NHB and Las Vegas Metro that have working UAS programs. NHB flies the same aircraft that we do, so if I have a problem with mine, I can call Sergeant Merrick up at NHB and have him come right to my scene. We're working pretty closely with Henderson. We're trying to get them into the same platform, so if they're out on the SWAT call with us and we need a battery, we can just go straight to them, get the battery and all that. So, and research. It took a lot of research to figure out what we're going to do.
Any other questions at the moment?
I'm
sorry.
Yeah, just a quick thing. I thought that the Wild West of the drone industry had kind of passed. Sales were kind of flattening out and all that sort of thing. But we really are still kind of in the Wild West, because I don't know how much time you spend on the showroom floor out there, but there's technology coming along. In your lifetime, you're going to see a single pilot fly a drone all the way across the United States nonstop. Just like a drone or boats have gone, or ships have gone, sailboats have gone across the Atlantic. It can happen because of hydrogen fuel cells and that sort of technology. And as far as law enforcement and fire and search and rescue, there are so many tools. We're working on a system right now where in an avalanche situation at a ski resort, we can dispatch a drone that as soon as that avalanche happens, within 10 minutes, we have a drone overhead that is just pinging cell phones and looking for those cell phone signals on the side of that mountain. So between thermal imaging, costs coming down to like $300 for a Seek camera for your DJI or whatever you want to put it on, the technology's there. With the FBI, we were working on sniffers. They send a drone in first on weapons of mass destruction, and all we're doing is sampling the air, doing a thermal on the device. So much potential. It truly is amazing, and you're going to see it. I mean, we are on the cusp here, folks.
Yeah, Joe.
Just quick, Ron, Michael, that was at the Tela indoor, with a repeater, is that a Tela repeater?
No, it's a Xiaomi something or other. I don't know. It came off Amazon for like $10.
Could you be outside the building and then operate off camera?
Because we used to, when we originally were doing tactical operations, we were using, I prefer to use an analog video signal like what we use on a race drone, primarily because I get zero lag, because I can't go into an environment that blinks out on me for a second, because then I'm going to wander into a wall. And the nice thing is with an analog signal, it's actually very simple to make a repeater. You can make them for like $5. They run off a battery. So what we were working on was that if, let's say we had a barricaded subject in a house and we're 300 feet down the road, we would be, because it's a 90-degree turn and I'm not in proximity to the house, once I break that threshold, I'm now going to lose signal, to where we would be able to have a covert unit go up to the windowsill, chuck a repeater into that general vicinity, and now the aircraft will actually transmit from inside the building to the repeater, and then it'll make the 90-degree turn and transmit to me where I'm working at that. The Telo, I found I can get about 300 feet out of it, but yes, you could go up to the windowsill, put the repeater somewhere in that vicinity, and then the aircraft can work indoors while it's transmitting to the repeater, signal's getting amplified, and then it gets sent outbound to where I'm actually operating it.
Do you find late disruption in terms of metal in the building, things like that?
Some, it's more than I like. I mean, if I'm given anything to go, I'm going to go. I use it's a modified OWL, which is essentially a race drone type build, custom build kind of thing. But the nice thing with the Telo, especially for newer pilots, because it does have a vision positioning system built into it, it makes it easier for them to learn and then work towards it. Because I can't put a race drone in somebody's hands that's never flown one. It's going to be ping pong with that one. But we work towards that. That's what we're looking towards. But indoor tactical ops is a whole different ballgame. You really have to start thinking about your equipment. Equipment really becomes the critical factor.
Thanks.
Yes, sir, in the red shirt.
You had mentioned a few minutes ago about public safety possibly getting, at least ideally, a waiver, for lack of a better word, for down the road, from maybe 200 feet below, 100 feet below. Do you see the time, up there, because you probably talked a lot about that maybe for the rest of us, that public safety would be separated from the rest, and do you think it's a good idea, where they would have a higher qualification, kind of like a CDL or whatever, even more so than this, to be able to justify that, okay, we are different, we're not necessarily better, but higher trained and therefore trusted more. Do you see that coming or ever going that direction? Do you think it's a good idea?
Well, the thing is, we're already kind of there. I mean, we have a public aircraft operation that we're able to do under a COA. So I was actually talking with someone earlier that's working at Dallas-Fort Worth. They're Dallas-Fort Worth Police, so they're in the thick of it. But they have a certificate of authorization. They can operate at their airport. So the paths are there, but whoever's running the program needs to know how to get into those paths. I mean, we saw it in Hurricane Harvey with the special government interest waivers and emergency codes. The process is there. It's just we have to know how to actually go and utilize those purposes.
So in short, yes. There should, this whole NIST training that the NFPA 2400 draft is working on talks about it, and I firmly believe that we have to be, as public safety, we have to be held to a higher standard than the average commercial operator, and we should have a higher skill set than the average commercial operator, because we're going to be dealing with scenes and environments that are more hazardous than the average commercial operator should be operating in. So I think it only makes
I don't know if most of you are familiar with drone racing, but drone racers fly with what they call FPV goggles, forward position view, so it's as though you are sitting in the cockpit of the aircraft. My question to Michael is, have you ever used the FPV goggles in an actual incident?
No.
Okay.
For reasons other than, I mean, for me, if I'm able to, I'll throw on a set of goggles and fly from the cockpit all day long, and it's natural. It's just like breathing. For us, especially in the law enforcement side, and this kind of goes for public safety in general, scene safety and situational awareness. A lot of times, staffing's relatively light, so if we do have, say, a fleeing suspect or something, chances are it's going to be either me as a solo operator on the FP or on the UAS. I may have a visual observer, and we're going to try and keep our flight operations as far away out of that perimeter as we possibly can. The problem is when I put on those goggles, I'm blind. and I can't see my outside environment. So now I either have to have a security person that's going to go and watch over my back. I've actually been working lately with Brother with the Air Scouter. They've been nice enough to let me play with that, and honestly, I've been loving that thing because now I'm able to get live camera video feed out of one eye while my other eye is completely open, and I'm able to see what's around me because I can't have a suspect. If I'm wearing goggles, that guy could literally walk up, put a gun against my head, and pull the trigger, and I'd never even know the difference. So, no. Simply for that fact, no, the search and rescue, I know some guys are using the DJI goggles and stuff because it helps you really focus on what you're looking at. Different scenario. So it does depend on what you happen to be going and doing, but even the fire ground, I don't think I'd be comfortable on a fire ground with a pair of goggles on because somebody's going to do something that is going to get me either hurt or killed. So situational awareness is everything.
Yeah, using goggles in search and rescue, you know, it has its advantages and disadvantages. It's more immersive, but we still have a line of sight, you know, requirement. You know, you get the Movarios out there and that sort of thing, which gives you, you know, sort of that goggle up close perspective and all your OSD and that kind of thing. But at the same time, it's just sort of kind of distracting. So goggles can be an advantage and a disadvantage, you know, kind of at the same time. There are some drones out there that are really ideal for the search and rescue type of application. We're using the new drone coming out right now is from X Dynamic. It's the Evolve. It has LiDAR on it, so that's coming out for the off-the-shelf solutions. And then the Power Vision Power Eye carries all kinds of payload, thermal and drop and parachutes and your cell phone, payload drop system, all that kind of thing, and interchangeable those Micro Four Thirds lenses. So there are different platforms out there completely available and maybe even more suited to your application, depending on whether you're in search and rescue, fire, or law enforcement.
Thank you, Jim. Well, folks, we've got to wrap this up. We're running out of time here, but certainly feel free to come up and speak to any of the folks here on the panel, get any other questions answered that haven't been asked or answered. So I want to thank all of you for being here because it's really all of us trying to move this technology forward. And I particularly want to thank everybody on this panel for their input and their thoughts. So please feel free to avail yourself of whatever knowledge that they may be able to provide you individually. So thank you again for being here. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Hey, just a real quick note. Thank you very much to Interdrone, Katie and Carl. You guys are always terrific every year. And if you guys want to catch me on social media, go to YouTube, Demon Season. We're out.